Good evening, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. My name is Zainab Chaudhry. I'm the director for CAIR's office here in Maryland. CAIR is the Council on American Islamic Relations. We are America's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization. On behalf of our office, we'd like to welcome you to tonight's virtual bystander intervention training in solidarity with AAPI communities. Obviously, you don't need me to explain to you why this kind of training is so critical in these times. Especially as we've seen the devastating uptick in the number of hate crimes and bias incidents targeting our community members, especially of the Asian American Pacific Islander ethnicity and race. It's been gratifying to see so many different community members reach out and want to support and stand in solidarity with members of the AAPI community. So this training tonight, this workshop was inspired by the desire to want to stand in solidarity with AAPI communities and to constructively strategize how we can collectively push back and resist against the hatred that we are seeing within our midst, especially in Howard County. We have seen, unfortunately, so many different events that have happened targeting the AAPI community. And so we're very excited to have you all here with us today. We are going to be recording this training, and this is going to be shared virtually as well through email and on social media afterwards as well. So if you miss anything, don't worry, it will be available afterwards as well. And we are so excited to have here with us today Kit Bonson, who is going to be our lead trainer for today's workshop. Just to give a little bit of background information on Kit, her bio is very impressive and very long. I'm blessed to consider her a dear friend, but in addition to her being my friend, she's also a longtime community activist and the co-founder of Montgomery County Civil Rights Coalition. She has been an activist and organizer for over 35 years for peace and justice issues. In 2010, she was one of the co-founders of MCCRC. In the time since the 2016 election, obviously we also saw a terrible increase in the uptake of reports of hate crimes across the country, including harassment and vandalism. And in response to these incidences, Kit created a very dynamic bystander intervention training program that reached people to teach them how they can non-violently respond if they witness someone who's being targeted for harassment. So starting in December 2016, MCCRC conducted numerous bystander intervention trainings for more than 650 community members around the Montgomery County suburbs in Washington, D.C., around the suburbs of Washington, D.C. In addition, MCCRC has held an extensive training for trainers with dozens of activists in early of January 2017. And these newly trained facilitators then went on to conduct bystander intervention trainings of their own all over the DC metro area. We saw around Inauguration Day in a coordinated effort that was organized by other local activist groups. And all told, these bystander intervention trainings that now are being taught by dozens of activists and community organizers around the country that were modeled off of the training that Kit Bonson devised have now been taught to thousands of people around the country, and probably even in different parts of the world as well. So we are so excited to have Kit here with us today to walk us through, what you can do if you or someone you know encounters someone who's targeted in a hate bias incident. And we encourage you to ask questions. If you come across any part of the presentation where you have a question, jot it down. We will definitely make sure that we have space towards the end of the program for you to ask your questions. And without further ado, Kit, I will pass it over to you. How are you doing?
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm so pleased that we're together. It's really important, as Zainab was saying, they come together in solidarity when terrible things are happening to anyone in our community. As she was saying, we started this back in 2016, and she was reading from something that's actually a number of years old now, and I've personally trained probably 3,000 people, as well as hundreds of trainers all over the country, some of whom were associated with CAIR. They sent me on a training tour on the West Coast, and I was really pleased to be able to work with people there. And then, as you say, this is just a concatenation of trainings all over the place where communities take this up because they realize that it's a valuable thing for everyone to know, because we want to stand up for each other when terrible things are happening. Should I go ahead and project my screen now? Okay. Okay, so this is a bystander intervention training principles and practices. And as she said, I'm Kit Bonson with the Montgomery County Civil Rights Coalition. Shoot, how do I how do I make it go forward? Oh, there, okay. So the outline of this training is we're gonna go through the history and philosophy of nonviolence and de-escalation, and then we're gonna go into some scenarios for bystander intervention. And, we do this in person, not usually on Zoom. So we are able to break into small groups. We're able to have it be very dynamic and interactive. However, when I have done it in a way where I call on people, they kind of feel like they're being called on in class. And so we were advised that maybe not call on people like we would in a room. So I'm just going to read these things to you and go through the explanations of why we think each of these principles are important. So bystander intervention. Oh, hey Zainab, I see that our pictures are obscuring some of what we're doing there. Is there a way to get rid of our pictures? Oh, okay. Um, Bystander intervention is founded on the concept of bearing witness, which we define as if we are aware of an injustice, there is a responsibility on us to do what we can to reduce that injustice. And what brought all of us together here today is the belief that we have the obligation to stick up for each other, that we are our sister's keeper and our brother's keeper. And in the past few years, as Zainab was saying, we've seen a terrible increase in the amount of hate crimes and harassment in our country. And this has been especially true recently for those in our AAPI community. These awful incidents have included community members being targeted in person while out in public, as well as hateful vandalism and graffiti at places of worship, schools, and private homes. As we know, these incidents are often motivated by negative bias on the basis of religion, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, and gender, anything that allows for people to be pushed aside as other. While we do this training, and when we do this training in person, we would be asking you now to provide examples where you have witnessed or heard about hateful incidents. Instead, we'll just ask you to think of an incident now and keep it in mind for when we get to the scenarios at the end. And this will help you use the compassion you felt for the targeted person in that incident for guiding your responses while doing bystander intervention. In this training, we want to give you the confidence to be that person who steps up to stop a bad situation from getting worse. And we'll do that by reminding you that you already have many of the principles and many of the skills that you need to do this. What you might not have yet is the practice in putting it all together so that you'll be able to respond quickly when needed. This is important because when just a single person acts, it can break the dynamic of a bad situation. Now, bystander intervention is based on the principles of nonviolence, like those used by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and by Gandhi. And Dr. King laid out 6 principles about nonviolence, and they are that nonviolence is a way of life for courageous people. Nonviolence seeks to win friendship and understanding. Nonviolence seeks to defeat injustice, not people. Nonviolence holds that suffering can educate and transform. And I just want to put a coda on that and say that this is what they were trying to do when they went down south and were sitting at lunch counters where they knew that they could be attacked. This is obviously not what we're encouraging or what we're setting you up for. We want you to avoid and de-escalate. 5th was nonviolence chooses love instead of hate. And nonviolence believes that the universe is on the side of justice. When you engage in nonviolent activism, you are part of a long line of activists who have done the same thing across history. And some examples of activist history include, pardon me, suffragists rallying at the White House in 1917, sit-down strike in Flint, Michigan in 1936, the civil rights movement sit-ins in 1963. So here we see the very lunch counter I was talking about. Protests against the South African apartheid in 1985. ACT UP demonstrations for AIDS funding in 1993. Climate change demonstrations in 2006. And Black Lives Matter demonstrations last summer in 2020. So bystander intervention training assumes a number of things. First is that we have an ethical, social, and political obligation to help each other when we are in a position, situationally and psychologically, to do so. 2, stepping up to act in solidarity with others can help to reduce the impact of a problematic situation. 3, the best way of responding as a bystander is through de-escalation, and that can be very hard, as we'll see. 4, as a bystander, you are there to support what the targeted person wants, not necessarily what you want. And 5th, practicing how to respond helps us to get past our hesitations so we can step up when necessary. So the principles of nonviolence and de-escalation are the fundamentals of bystander intervention. And all of us have been in difficult circumstances that could have taken a very bad turn for the worse if it weren't for somebody stepping in and de-escalating. In general, our training today will emphasize ways of responding in public where you do not engage with the attacker, who is likely someone you do not know. This may be difficult because for many of us, our natural inclination is to go up to the source of the trouble and make it stop. In fact, it's likely that you will find that even among people in your own group or social circle, there will be some who are not committed to de-escalation. Instead, they may feel it's important to get in the face of the attacker and to not let an insult or action pass without calling out the attacker. Many of us have these instincts because it can feel like the right thing to do. But this is not what we're going to be teaching today. We are not passing judgment on those who want to stand up for themselves when they have been targeted. But as a strategy, we believe that bystander intervention should be based on seeking rapid solutions that bring an incident to a close peacefully and quickly, rather than risking escalating a situation when dealing with people that you don't know. One thing this training will not do is teach you how to deal with situations of immediate danger. If you encounter a person who is threatening harm to you or another person, it is important that you do what you can to leave the situation as fast as possible and to encourage others to do so as well. Being a bystander who intervenes means that you are weighing the risks of stepping up in a particular situation. So we want you to be brave enough to stand up for a fellow community member, but we also don't want anyone to get hurt by doing so. So should you call the police? Well, in general, we advise people not to immediately call the police unless the situation has or is very likely to become physically violent. This is because there are many people who see the presence of police as a risk of escalation in and of itself. This can be because they are undocumented and fear arrest, or because their community experience with the police has been disrespectful or outright dangerous. And we recognize that there is often a strong element of privilege on the basis of race or class involved in feeling free to call the police into a situation. But as a bystander, remember, we're there to support the targeted person. And that means that the targeted person gets to have the say about whether the police are called. So we want you to ask that person if you are thinking that police intervention could be useful, and then follow that person's lead. So taking impactful videos, I think we all know how important that can be. I mean, right now we're watching the Derek Chauvin trial, and we're seeing how those videos are really critical to our understanding of what happened on that day. So remember that when you're taking a video of a situation, hold the phone sideways, like in this photo, so that you get more of the scene, and hold the phone steady, especially while scanning the scene. One of the things that someone who came to one of the trainings said, he was a TV producer, and he said, if I have a video that's in this perspective, sideways, I'm much more likely to use it on television than I am if it's upright. And we all know why, because they have to fill in the sides with gray stuff and it just looks really strange. So always remember to hold your phone on the side. Recording can bring a bad situation to a rapid end, but you can also risk escalating the situation if the attacker doesn't want evidence of their bad behavior. So you want to monitor the situation continuously and put your phone away if it begins to feel dangerous. You can also lower the phone so you're not obviously filming, or you could at least leave the audio function rolling. While it's legal in all states to capture images of people in public, in many states it's illegal to record someone speaking in public without their express permission. So find out what the laws are in your state to assure legality. Hold on, I'm trying to advance on my other thing. Okay, so what if the bad situation involves police misconduct? And some of you may recognize this photograph. It's from a Black Lives Matter demonstration in Buffalo, New York in 2020, when a line of police officers deliberately pushed an elderly protester to the cement, where he hit his head and suffered a brain injury. This incident was filmed by a bystander who then shared the video with the media and then with legal establishment. It's always legal to record the actions of the police in public as long as you are not interfering with those police actions. This is not a know your rights training though, so we won't be getting into details, but the police cannot legally ask you to stop recording, to delete your recording, or to hand over your phone. One way to record the police is through the ACLU's Mobile Justice app, which is available at the link you see below. But if you just put on Mobile Justice ACLU into your phone, you'll be able to pull it up as well. This app is currently only available in 18 states, so you have to check in your area if it's available, but it is available in DC and Maryland. This app allows you to take a video of police misconduct and only police misconduct and immediately send it to the ACLU, especially if it looks like someone is going to try and take your phone. Please do not use this app to record other hateful incidents, though. And you'll excuse me, I need to take a sip of water. So how do we be ready to be a bystander who intervenes? Well, we want you to develop a new identity in public as someone who will step in when there is something bad developing or happening. And to do this, we want you to be aware of what's happening around you when you're in public. And if you see something happening, really pay attention. Take off your headphones, pause your conversation, position yourself to get a better view. Don't assume that someone else will do something. That's called the bystander effect, or more scientifically, responsibility diffusion. Point out the situation to people around you. Tell them that you're going to support the targeted person and ask them if they'd like to help. A lot of people are seeing what's happening and they kind of want to be deputized. They'll tell you if they don't, and that it's their right to decline. But if somebody steps up, it's really helpful because they're able to then start coordinating how our response can be to help the targeted person. When you first approach the targeted person, introduce yourself and quietly explain that you saw what was happening and wanted to offer support. So I would say, "Hi, I'm Kit. I saw that guy was giving you a really hard time." And then I might say, "Can I just sit with you, or may I talk with you for a while?" So you want to be very clear about why you're going up to them. If the person says that they're fine and doesn't want support, move back, but monitor the situation. Now, I want you to note that in this training, we are not referring to the targeted person as the victim. We do this so that the person retains the ability to be the one to decide how they will respond and how you should respond. Our goal is to empower the targeted person. And empowering means that the person feels that they can alter the course of the situation and take back some of the control. So, what is our orientation to approaching a bystander scenario? Well, it really all stems from this cartoon, which in 2016 went viral because it was showing how to help a woman with a hijab who was being targeted in public. Mayriel, the French cartoonist, cautioned that those who want to help should do two things. Do not in any way interact with the attacker. You must absolutely ignore them and focus entirely on the person being attacked. And second, make sure to always respect the wishes of the person that you're helping. And these premises are the very foundation of this bystander intervention training. Now, I'm going to show you a long list of principles of bystander intervention. Normally, I would be going around in a circle and we'd have handouts and everybody would get to read one part of this. But unfortunately, we're online, so I'm going to read them myself. So we recognize that we are dealing with an unfamiliar situation with people that we do not know. And this means that direct confrontation of an attacker by us as bystanders is not going to be the best way to respond. So we want to show moral courage by acting from a centered place, despite our fears, and by choosing principles over emotion. And you may be feeling anxiety, anger, or self-righteousness, but we want to remember these principles as we go through. We want to engage in de-escalation by limiting the ability of a situation to become more intense and by reducing the drama in the situation. And that can be really hard because drama is just so delicious. And sometimes you really feel like you just want to get caught up in what's going on. But drama is escalation, and that's not what we want. We want to shift the attention in the situation by interacting as much as we can only with the targeted person, by ignoring the attacker, by freezing them out, even if they escalate verbally, by creating a safer space for the targeted person. We can't make everything better, but we can at least stand in solidarity, by bringing in other people for additional support and varied responses. And we want to reach out to the targeted person by being present as an ally and an equal, not as a savior, by taking away the ability, by not taking away the ability of the targeted person to respond, by asking if they want our help, by asking before we touch them. And this can be especially hard for women because we often have a tendency to put a hand on a shoulder because we are people who are understood by public to not be threatening. But these people don't know us, the people who are being targeted. And so we have to be extra careful not to touch them unless we ask if we can. And we want to ask how we can best help them. We want to offer possible solutions, but the targeted person may reject them, and that's okay because they're the ones who are determining how this should go down. And finally, we want to offer emotional support and empathy by befriending and connecting with that person. Each of these principles will be used in our training in response to a variety of scenarios. But remember, I'm going to say this again, you are there in solidarity, not as a savior. And don't worry that you won't remember exactly the right thing to do. Think of this as an improv around the principles that we laid out. That way you will be adaptable to a situation, no matter how it changes. So bystander intervention can go very badly and it can go very well. And normally if I was doing this in person, what I would do is I would deputize 3 people and I would have them come up and I would have a little tete-a-tete session with them and I would say, okay, attacker, here's what I want you to do. I want you to be really loud and really obnoxious. And bystander, I want you to only interact with the attacker and I want you to totally ignore the targeted person. And what that usually shows as this plays out in this little scenario is that it gives energy to the attacker. The bystander is escalating the situation in a frightening way that didn't have to happen. And the targeted person is sitting there thinking, what is unfolding in front of me? This is just awful. And I don't feel supported at all. So then we debrief with them about their emotions because the emotions are also interesting. The attacker is now feeling more like they're justified in doing this because they're getting all this attention from the bystander. And the bystander feels like they're doing something righteous because they're really getting into it with somebody because the drama is so rich. But the targeted person feels scared and alone. And none of this is obviously what we want to have happen, right? So this is just a way of showing people how things can totally get out of control when you have the best of intentions. And then we have another tete-a-tete with the 3 people and we tell them, okay, bystander, I only want you to interact with a targeted person, go up, introduce yourself, explain that you saw what was happening, explain that you'd be willing to sit with them or talk with them if you'd like, and just ignore the attacker. And then we tell the attacker, go ahead and try and escalate, but that person is not going to interact with you. And what's interesting is that when we play this out, the bystander goes and talks to the targeted person. The targeted person, because this is a good scenario, says, yeah, I would really appreciate it if you could just sit here and talk to me. They start talking, they're friendly with each other. And the attacker continues to attack, but that person's not getting any attention at all. And pretty soon they start to feel pretty silly because if this is in public, everybody's seeing them rant and nobody cares. Now, this is just to say that this is sometimes what happens. Sometimes they can increase their escalation and it gets really bad. But at that point, then we have other solutions, which is like getting out of there. So this creates a big safer space for the targeted person and the attacker usually feels isolated. So what happens when the attacker doesn't get your attention, like what I was talking about? Well, attention is a valuable thing, and when an attacker doesn't get it, that person can often feel the wind go out of their sails. Alternately, the attacker may feel angry and try and escalate. But in either case, we will continue to provide support to the targeted person and ignore the attacker. That is, unless the attacker makes threats or becomes physical. And then we encourage the targeted person to leave the situation with us and take as many people as possible with us as well. Remember that our role is not to get sucked into ever giving attention to the attacker on behalf of the person being targeted. You have to be calm and centered in this situation. Always be thinking about how to de escalate, even if you want to do just the opposite in the name of justice. Ignoring someone who is angry can be a very difficult thing to do, especially in a political context when you might want to defend your principles. Hold on for a second. Okay, so people often ask us, well, what if the attacker sees my intervention as provocation? And I have to say, I think that the concept of provocation can be a cover in some ways because an attacker is often going to use any response by anybody as simply an excuse to escalate. And it's better to be supportive of the targeted person and to not let the attacker get to you psychologically than it is to let someone go through that terrible situation all alone. So to practice non-engagement, if we were doing this as an in-person training, we now have you do a classic nonviolent training scenario that is called a hassle line. And that's what you see being acted out in some of the trainings that I've given. In a hassle line, we create two lines of people facing each other, as you see here, and one side yells while the other side ignores the taunts. And after a minute, we switch roles so that the side that was quiet is now the yelling one, and the side that was yelling is now practicing non-engagement. And this is exactly what civil rights activists were trained to do before they went into an action back in the 60s. By doing this, you learn to not respond to somebody, no matter how nasty their comments get. And this is difficult to do because it's really hard to maintain composure and non-engagement. And this may be especially hard for any of us who have had abusive situations in our life. But in a hassle life, I would want you to give me your best centered Yoda, where no matter what happens, you're not going to let it get to you. You're not going to let those nasty comments get to you because they're just going to roll right off of you, no matter how the words escalate. The attacker is trying to get you to respond, but you have decided that you are centered and you're not going to give them an opening. You are not in a debate or a discussion or a negotiation with them. They have no impact on you. So here are some ways of acting when the attacker is targeting you. First, don't make eye contact. You can look to see what's happening, but you don't have to look them in the eye. That's something that we give when we want to make contact. And don't engage with their words. Resist the urge to engage with the drama. You are there to de-escalate, not to get drawn into the attacker scenario. Now, that being said, the most important aspect of any scenario is personal safety, not some political principle. So I want to emphasize again, if you do not feel safe, do not stay, and definitely do not try to stand your ground politically. Just get out of there and ask if the targeted person wants to come with you. Oh, why is this not forwarding? Oh no. I'm sorry, I'm not able to forward this somehow. Oh, let's see, there we go. Now we'll go back one. Okay, so in this next section, we would normally be acting out scenarios in which community members are being harassed, and then we can step up as bystanders to intervene. And so we tried to do this online. It's a little hard to do it online. So what I'm going to do instead is just go through the scenarios and explain how we have worked them out. So the first scenario is the one that was in the cartoon. It's a woman with a hijab on a metro, and she's being harassed by an angry person. So what do? Well, as we said before, you quietly introduce yourself to the woman, say that you saw what was happening, and ask if she would like you to stay with her. And you want to ignore the attacker, even if that person escalates. So to practice, I would see this thing, I would maneuver my way over to the woman, kneel down next to her perhaps, if that's possible to make it more eye to eye, sit down next to her if there's a space there, position myself somehow to be able to get her attention. And without touching her on the shoulder or anything, just say, "Hi, I'm Kit. I saw this guy's just being a real jerk to you. Would you like me to sit down and talk with you for a while just so that you have somebody else to be with?" And that person can say, "Yes, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I would like to do that." And then you just start chatting about anything, books you've read, how the weather is, what's in the news. If they say no, though, "I think I got it," that's fine. That is their prerogative. And what we want you to do is to step aside, but monitor what's happening in that situation. Are people able to speak and with us at this point, Zainab?
I believe in webinar format, they can type in the chat group, but they cannot actually speak. If
Okay, well, I cannot see that and still project my screen. If anybody has any questions about this scenario or other suggestions for how we might deal with this, you can put it in the chat and then Zainab will read it to us or ask any questions that you might have.
So
So give
Kit, on the back end, I was actually able to give permission to some of the attendees to speak. But if you're not able to speak, we encourage you to definitely share your questions and your thoughts in the chat feature.
So is there somebody who may be able to speak who has a question? You may not, but I just wanted to give you that option. And Zainab, you'll tell me if anything shows up in the chat.
I will, and it should show up for you on your end as well. If you pull up the chat box, it should appear on your end as well.
I am, oh, let's see. I'm afraid to do that while I'm sharing my screen.
Sounds good. Thank you, Deborah. No questions there.
Okay, well then we'll go ahead and go on to the next one then. So this is a Latino man who's being harassed for speaking Spanish with a clerk in a store. And so interestingly enough, when I came up with the scenario, because it seemed like it might happen, then there was this video that went viral back in 2017 of exactly this situation. So it was at a Target and a Latino man was at the head of the line at the return desk. And he was speaking Spanish with the clerk who also knew Spanish, so was speaking Spanish with him. And he started being harassed for speaking Spanish. So somebody who wasn't even in line just came over and started saying, you know, all the terrible things that people say about going back to where you belong and all that horrible stuff. And so nobody did anything. And that man was really upset. So what can we do to not have that situation happen where a person is now having one of their worst days? Well, what you want to do is approach the man. First off, get out of line. It doesn't matter if you are losing your place in line. It's always more important to lose your place in line than to let somebody go through that awful situation by themselves. So approach the man at the head of the counter, even if you don't speak Spanish, and smile. You can maybe put your hand on your heart. You want to show them, I am with you. I am friendly. I am not with that jerk over there. And just try and stand with them. So it creates some barrier between you and the other person who's being so awful. Now you can ask the clerk if that person can go get a store manager, or you can say, I'm going to go get a store manager. So you can start deputizing people. It may be that when you have stepped out of line and showed solidarity with this person by putting your hand on your heart or just smiling at them, if you speak Spanish, of course, you would say whatever it is that you wanted to share with them. There may be others in line who also come out and start surrounding that person so that the attacker no longer is able to have a line of sight to that. Now, somebody should be monitoring to make sure that the attacker is not going to physically then escalate, because again, at that point, we want everybody to get out of there. But this is how we would handle this scenario. Does anybody have any questions or thoughts on that? I'll pause for a minute while we give people a chance to type something. Zainab, anything?
No, it seems like we're all good right now.
Okay, great. So we'll go on to the next one. So in this scenario, a gay couple with kids is being harassed for being unfit parents. So we're imagining that two nice men, so in love, they have a bunch of kids with them, they're out in the park, and some awful person comes up and starts harassing them. And this is in front of their kids. And so if you see this, maybe you have your own family with you. Maybe you approach the gay couple and their family and compliment their kids or empathize with how hard it can be to be raising kids, especially if now their kids are, acting out because this horrible thing is happening. So you want to smile at others to encourage more support. And people, when they see this, will think, wow, I can't believe this is actually happening in my city, that this jerk is doing this. But you know what? If you start talking to them as if they are the best family in the world, there may be others who want to come over and join you just because they want to show that they are not standing with that person who's being awful. They're standing in solidarity with the gay couple. So again, just want to remind you, ignore the attacker. It's going to be really hard, but that's what you got to do. So that's our orientation to a scenario out in a park. I wonder if there are any questions or thoughts on other things that we might do to be supportive. Okay, hearing none again, and I know Zan will tell us if there was something. Okay, so the next one is a trans woman is harassed on her way to a bathroom at a restaurant. So maybe you're coming out of the bathroom and you see this happening in the hallway where some really awful person is saying terrible things to this nice woman as she's just trying to go and use the facilities. So what you can do is approach the woman and ask if she would like you to walk with her to the bathroom. We were cautioned in one of the trainings that I did is don't say, I can take you to the bathroom, because those words, even if you don't mean them to be, sound like something that you would say to a child. So walk with her to the bathroom is a phrase that you might want in your head. You can offer to go inside with her if you're a woman, or you can wait outside, whether you're a man or a woman. And if she tells you that she doesn't need your help, that's cool. Respect her wishes. But you will, again, want to ignore the attacker. You want to create a safer space by talking with her and showing that you are standing with her, because like nobody deserves to be harassed as they're going off to use the facilities. Are there any thoughts on other things that we might do with that? Okay, hearing none. So thank you. This is usually longer when we try and do it interactively, but I'm really glad that you were able to join us. We really welcome your feedback on this training. If you'd like to have us give a training to another group that you are part of, you can contact me, Kit Bonson, at the Earthlink address that you have there. And I also want to emphasize that this training is a script. You can tell that I'm reading a script. That's okay. I hold a script up while I'm in person with people. And you use this, you can just pick it up and use it with a group yourself. But if you want, we can provide a training of trainers where we mostly tell people how to deal with group dynamics that can come up. Either people talk too much or there's strong emotions, because usually when we do this, we're interactively asking for people to give us examples of things that they've seen. And sometimes people break down crying because, they've seen terrible things happen either in public to someone else, or they've experienced it themselves. So we just want to make sure that people have the wherewithal to manage a group emotionally as well as just facilitating, because it can be a very different thing. On the other hand, if you're with people that you know very well, you may be able to just pick up the training script and use it, read it off, and do all the interactive stuff. So I will stop sharing my screen now. Okay, so let's see. If anybody has any things, let's see. People are writing things here. Let's see. I like your wording. Great. I'm so glad. One of the things we did in developing this for the last, well, I guess it's going on 5 years, is that when we first did this, we would give a training, and then people would be, all the people who were with me in my group would be taking down notes of what was good and bad. And then we'd come back to my house afterwards, and we would just start rolling through about what was good and what was bad. So we've actually road tested this a lot and thought very deeply about the best way to say these things. So I'm glad that's true. let's see, Deborah says, I can imagine that in-person training would be so different, but this is incredibly helpful, even if it's quick. Well, thank you. It is very different, especially when you do the hassle line, because it's a funny thing. The first time we do it, the people who are yelling and the people who are standing here, okay, you know, we're just going to let it roll off of us, best-centered Yoda, that whole thing. Okay, now you got to switch. So it's loud the first time, but the second time, the people who are being yelled at are now louder than they were for the first people. So it's very interactive, and it's difficult, I think, sometimes to imagine these scenarios. You know, it gives you some tools in your head, but when you actually act them out, you really see what can go right and what can go wrong. And what's great about being in a group of 6 to 8 people is that people are all supportive of each other. I say what went right, what went wrong, and then everybody learns from each other. And every single time that I do this training, and I've given a lot of these trainings, there's something else that somebody suggests that I'd never thought of and no one else had ever suggested. So that's what's so great about our community, is that we are really resourceful and we're really creative. And that means that you are that person as well. So when you see something happening, you have some foundational principles now, you have some ideas about how to start off a scenario, but you may think of things on your feet because that's just who we are. Oh, Samira said, thank you. We miss you so much. Oh, I miss you too, Samira. Are there any other questions? Or I think that we can share on the CAIR site the link for all of our scripts so that you can see those. And as I said, if you have, I'll put my email address again, kitbonson@earthlink.net. So if you want to contact me directly, I'd be more than pleased to receive your comments and thoughts.
Thank you so much, Kit, for this powerful, informative presentation. As always, you do such a phenomenal job, I think, of really breaking down very difficult, complicated concepts in a very digestible, easy way. And I love the fact that you pointed out that this training has gone through so many different recycled versions. And I think that's part of what makes it even more impactful and powerful, because it has been tried, tested, and true. And it's gone through like the ringer when it comes to making sure that the principles that you share are actually valid and helpful and applicable.
I'll tell you something. One of the biggest compliments I think I ever got politically was I was giving a training of trainers in Northern California on behalf of CAIR. And so there were a lot of Muslim people community and were there. And there was a 18-year-old Muslim man who said, okay, I'll read the script. And he said to himself, this is not going to be my words. This is the words of some older white woman. I will not be able to read these. But he said to me, you know what? These are things that I would actually say. I could see myself saying these things. So I thought, well, you know, if I can span that kind of age gap, then maybe I'm doing something right.
There you go. It's intergenerational, interracial, like it crosses the spectrum. So, and we've heard a lot of positive feedback from the different states that you have gone to, especially where you've partnered with CAIR chapters and CAIR offices. And I think that that's just testimony to the fact that the thought that's gone into putting this together, devising and developing it, really has been tremendously helpful for so many communities. And we hope that those of our attendees who joined us today and those who will be watching this later, the recorded version via email or via social media or what have you, that they will also be able to benefit from this. And if they are ever in a situation where they see a member of the AAPI community or any other community who is being impacted or targeted by hate bias, that they feel more empowered to step in. I think oftentimes when these kind of situations happen, in that moment, we freeze and we don't know really how to act. And then when we train ourselves and prepare ourselves, I think it's easier to condition ourselves to be able to respond and step in if we see somebody who needs help. And so I love the fact that you emphasized, you know, the mental portion of this. Like there's a physical aspect, but there's also the mental kind of training that we have to condition ourselves to be prepared to act in those kind of situations. So incredibly helpful as always. We loved having you with us today. And thank you again for your time, especially right now when you're in the midst of a major life change. So,
Yeah, moving. Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for being with us. Good night.
Thanks everyone for joining us. Good night. Bye-bye.